Hello everybody and welcome to Adobe Live. We would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we are creating and streaming from today and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. My name is Flynn, I am hosting today and I'm here with fantastic photographer and artist Karen Alsop. Hi Karen, how are you?
Hi Flynn, it's fantastic to be back. Thanks for having me.
That's great. This is the first time we've had you on all year, so we're going to have some good times today jumping into Photoshop. We're going to learn how to turn day into night, which is super cool and very excited. So I see some folks in chat. Hello, Bernard. Hello, Marco as well. If you're watching live, feel free to ask questions as we're going along. Let us know if you have questions around Photoshop, maybe something that you've seen and you want clarified. Maybe you missed something and you actually want us to kind of jump back and have another quick little look at that. Totally cool. Let us know because we are live here today. But Karen, before we kick everything off, can you introduce yourself a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Of course, yes. So I call myself a photographic artist, and what I mean by that is that I take photos. So everything that I use it starts with photography, and then I bring it together in Photoshop to create something that is impossible generally in real life, that I make possible within Photoshop. So that is my work. That's what I do every day. It's an amazing thing to be able to just do for a living. So that's who I am, coming from a wedding and portrait photography background, but now doing this. So yeah.
Do you miss doing the weddings?
Not really.
You don't have to answer that. Yeah. I imagine that would be quite stressful, but you get to work with like all these amazing animals and everything. So many that we're going to see, which sounds like a dream job, I think, for a lot of people. But I think you were going to say something before I interrupted you.
Oh, I was just going to show my website. So I thought if people are looking for they can go to all the links on there. So there's Facebook, there's Instagram, there's LinkedIn, YouTube, Behance. So go on to the website, which is storyart.com, and you can check everything out. So I've got an art gallery that people buy prints from, and then I've got an education site, the Heart Project, which is charity work that we do for families and kids that have disabilities and sicknesses, and my commercial work. So yeah, storyart.com if people are looking to find out more.
Excellent. And that link is in the description as well, and also just shared in chat. So feel free to check that out. Then how about we just, transition across to what we're into today? Because I know you've got a big file for us today. So let's just get stuck straight into it.
I have the biggest file I have ever worked on in my entire life. So I've got this artwork that I've been working on for the last few months. Wow. But, it actually started probably mid-year last year as an idea and a concept, and I didn't actually start working on it until this year. But it's 50 Australian sayings in one artwork. So maybe we can show it on screen as best as we possibly can, because it is such a long file. It's panoramic. I'll explain why, but there is a lot going on in this image, and 50 Australian sayings worked around a lot of animals and things like that, and based with the scene being Puffing Billy, which is where it's going to be displayed. So it'll be up in the Puffing Billy Visitor Centre as two massive canvases next to each other at 4 meters long or wide. So it's been massive pulling this together, and as people can probably imagine, a lot of planning has had to go into this to make it work.
I'll bet.
So I'm excited. Yeah, I'm excited to share how it all come together and how we can turn daytime images into nighttime scenes as well.
Yeah, that's great. So this was not shot at night, right? Like everything we're seeing is either some of it shot in the studio, but then some of it was daytime kind of. Yeah. I assume low contrast photography. I don't know what the approach is there. I guess you'll tell us when we get to it.
I will. Yeah. But most of it, I'll sort of go over it. Most of it is shot in overcast or soft lighting, right, which means that we can manipulate it quite a lot in Photoshop and change the lighting to suit. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, hey, I've got this video that you pre-prepared for us, which is super cool. Do you want to? Yes. Should we jump over into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So if people want to see the crazy amount of hours and work that's gone into it, just pull back into a very short span of time, then I'll take you through that in a speed edit.
Okay, let's check it out.
To begin the process of bringing everything together, I took all of the elements that I'd photographed at Menzies Creek Station and I started laying them out in a way that worked to my eye. So one of the big things that I needed to be aware of is you can see that there are 4 sections and that the image is broken up into 4 sections and also into 2 sections. And this is because this actual artwork needs to be printed in 16:9 ratio, so 2 of them, and also in squares so that the Puffing Billy Railway can actually sell them as coasters and t-shirts and everything. So working through this and adding then all of the different elements that make up the Australian sayings, like tickets on yourself that I'm working on here with the emu, meant that I had to make sure that if I break that into a square, that section, that it works. Here we've got Captain Cook, so having a Captain Cook is having a look, so that's rhyming slang. And here is Budgie Smuggler, so working on the cat that is actually smuggling budgies. And just going through, and you can see that each element that I bring in, I am individually adding the lighting and shading as I go. So this is a key point that I'd really love to get across as I teach you this class. It's important with something that is so complicated and there's so much going on that the work needs to be done on each and every element. I'm actually separating these elements out first as smart objects, but then actually converting that to a smart linked object. And this is to save some space in the main file, which I'll go through the process and why I'm doing that. But this is a massive file otherwise. Now you can see that as I'm adding these pieces, I'm adding shadows, I'm working with the light that I've created. So the original captures, most of them are captured in an overcast setting. So it's a soft lit environment. I capture things in my studio with the same thing. But if, like the chicken there, you saw there was a little bit of light behind, I can adjust that as well using some techniques to add darkness around the edges. So photographing every single element, this is something that I do for my pieces. It doesn't matter what it is, I'm bringing in photographs that I've taken. So a lot of them might be in my stock collection from Lightroom CC, where I keep over 40,000 images. And some of them I need to find the elements and I need to photograph them for the piece. So the zip there was photographed for the piece. This entire piece has 50 Australian sayings in it. Actually, it has 52. I've got a couple of bonus ones. And I had to plan this in extreme detail to make sure that I could fit everything together. There's interaction between the characters, there's consistency in the lighting, and it's all been manipulated to suit my narrative and what's going on. So every last element has a reason for being there.
Wow. So a lot of images. My biggest takeaway is how big your library is.
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of the images that I've used, so all photographs that I've taken, they were already in my library. So I've got a Lightroom library, a Lightroom Creative Cloud library made up of over 40,000 images at this point in time that I've taken over the last 7 or 8 years. And it meant that I could sit and work on this predominantly pulling from that library and just needing to kind of fill in the gaps with certain images that I didn't have or that I needed to specifically shoot. So I'm excited to take everyone through that process. So I might start with the plan because it's quite embarrassing actually showing this. I cannot draw at all. So I don't know, is that up on screen at the moment?
Yes, it is. Yeah, sorry.
Awesome.
Yeah, so we can see the red lines and the drawings.
The stick figures.
The stick figures.
Yes. they're fantastic, aren't they? But it helped me work out where everything was going to sit. So I had this kind of in my head for about 6 months, just floating around with which animals I'd use and what sayings would connect to what. So there should be a link that has all of the sayings, and you can have a look at that. It's PDF, has all of the Australian sayings that I've used, and then it has the little thumbnails of where you would find them in this artwork. And it was important to me to connect everything together in some way. So this is actually the 5th piece in my animal pun series, and I really wanted to just make I don't know, as much as I could, have it make sense as to why the different animals were in different spots and how they connected to each other. So this is the start, and this is kind of figuring out also the layout, because this image, as you can see, this sort of color coded here. This section here is the first part that is going to be a canvas, which will sit next to another part. So 16 by 9 ratio, same as my other ones. So they'll sit next to each other as 2 pieces that join up as one. But also it needed to split into 4 pieces. So 4 separate individual sections that could be put on coasters and t-shirts and merchandise, so that people can buy a set of coasters and then they can join them all together. So I had to have it really well planned so that it all fit, and it made sense, and it sort of had that crossover. So when I was working on it, you can see my grids here, so that I knew that everything fit into the boxes, and so that those individual boxes make sense as well. I'm just going to zoom down here to the second box.
Yeah, so each piece needs to kind of stand by itself for certain reasons. They'll be need to print separately and different types of materials and things like that. Yeah, it's an interesting challenge.
Yeah, it is, because you want the flow through. So you can even see, in this bit, there's a little bit of the emu crossing over into this section, but it's not like something's cut so that it, doesn't work. The same thing over here with this section. You've got a little bit of the kangaroo's butt in this one, but it still all works together as one whole piece. So yeah, lots and lots of planning to bring it all together. And what I had to do was go through and work out, okay, what sayings can I create a picture from? So on screen here, probably one of the first ones I came up with was this one. Budgie smuggler. I'm trying not to zoom so it goes too glitchy, because it is a big file. But this one here, budgie smuggler. Oh, there we go. I don't know. It means speedos or bathers or whatever. It's a bit weird. But I wanted to make it so that it was visually, it meant that, but it's obviously the cat's got budgies. So I borrowed my son's undies and put them on a dummy. I got the sack from my library collection, a couple of the birds, a couple of the budgies here I'd photographed in a pet store with my phone. And then I realized I was low on budgies. At one point I put a parrot here and made it a budgie color and hoped that it would suffice, but my husband said it looks like a parrot. So I got parrots to come into the studio. So I put the word out and I asked for some parrots, and they came in, and then I photographed some more. Oh, sorry, not parrots, budgies. I photographed some more budgies so that I could bring it all together.
So when you do that, do you just sort of say, hey, like, I'll give you some high-res photos as payment or something like that? Like, is that usually the deal? Yeah, I do a print for them. So they're excited because it's going to be up as a massive showcase print up at the local it's the local tourist space, so they're excited to have their budgies or whatever it is immortalized.
Pretty much. But I also give them a print if they go to the trouble of actually bringing in the animals and helping me out with it. Nice. So so all these, as I go, I just kind of go, okay, well, I need a chicken, a hen, and I wanted to do hen's party. So what else do I need? Well, I had the hens in my library. I needed hen's teeth, so I got some teeth from another animal.
Nice, yeah.
I needed the sashes and all of the other little bits and pieces, so I got them from a party place. And these little chicks, I photographed them a long time ago. Actually, I had someone say, I've got some little chickens, do you want to photograph them? And so I had them come in the studio and I did that, and I actually hadn't used them yet. So often if there's an opportunity that arises to photograph something cool, I'll do that, so I know I've got that in my library for a later stage.
Oh, that's good planning.
Yeah. So I would say, if I'm looking at this whole thing, probably 70% would have been from my library. And 30% I've shot. So the scene itself, I went and photographed it, because that part, needing to make it look like it was sort of one scene across the station and Puffing Billy, and needing all of those elements, I needed to photograph all those pieces specifically for what I had in mind, so that I could build from that.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
So if I turn that off, so I'm turning off all of my layers except for the background layers, this is sort of where the scene started. And this is not one scene. This is actually multiple bits and pieces as well. So if I go here, you can see there's a shed. So that was further back over here at the station, but I wanted to move it forward. There's a dunny. A dunny is a toilet. I probably need to translate for anyone that's not from Australia and is watching. They probably know that though. And then there's this back trailer bit. So all of this is kind of pulled together. The bike is there just because it's further back in the scene. And then the station is also a build of multiple different images as well. So it is not, if I go there, that was the original station.
Right.
Turn that off. So, and I shot that so that I could build a panoramic picture from multiple images. So I took a shot, moved, took a shot, moved, took a shot, and then in Lightroom I made a panorama and brought it together so that I had that long wide shot in all the resolution that I needed. Yeah.
Cool.
Jump in and ask me if there's any questions as I'm talking, Clint.
Will do. You mentioned before, I think some of the budgies you said you took on your phone, like you took the photo on your phone. So that surprises me, like as a photographer. Like I know the best camera is the one that you have in your hand, but it surprises. So how are you able to do that? Do you shoot in RAW on your phone? Is it just because you're in a situation
usually
where you didn't have all your gear?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, there's something I could use. Let's add that. So there's a couple of ways that I can do it. So there is RAW on Lightroom in the actual app on your phone. So I might just photograph it through that. So where's some of so these are all the images that I've used as elements in the file. Yep. So some of them are phone images and some of them are actual proper camera images. Usually I use my Nikon Z9, which is like 45 megapixels. My iPhone can be the same if I shoot on RAW. So that works pretty well. It's just not as good quality, but when it's small elements, it doesn't matter too much. So if I'm trying to find the budgies in here actually, but
there's a big difference from like kind of snapping a photo on your phone, like just natively compared to like shooting in RAW using Lightroom or something.
There's a bit of a difference. There's definitely a quality difference. You can't control as much of the depth of field and the detail in it. But when there's small images, it doesn't matter too much. There we go. I found it. So this is a Lightroom image. And in fact, I think I might have shot that one in JPEG. It's a pretty bad shot. It's not very high quality, and it was that photo was probably from about 5 years ago, so the quality is not as good as what I've got now on a phone. But there's methods in Photoshop I can use to just improve it a bit or to get away with it being such a small image.
Yeah. Cool.
If I know it's going to be a really high, a large part of the file or a large part of the image, if I go back to Photoshop, like the scene itself, then I'll shoot properly on my Z9 and I'll make sure that I've got all of the quality. But this was shot in sort of overcast light. The sun did keep coming out, and I kept telling it to go away because I didn't want the sun. So there's a little light at the back, but you get away with that. And it's a bit warped as well because I've joined it together as a panorama. But again, I'm doing so much work in Photoshop and putting other things on top of this that it doesn't matter too much. I can warp it, I can puppet warp it, I can do what I need to in Photoshop. Right. So if I go back to the actual file, you can see, I've added a bit more to it. I've added the booking station, so that part of it pops out, and I could add all of the little animals there that I wanted. I've pulled back the image, softened it up. There's not as much contrast there. So usually when I bring an image in for a composite, in RAW, the first thing I do is adjust the highlights and shadows so that there's more detail there, not as much contrast, and that way I can build up on it. So you can see in here, these are all smart linked objects. Probably go into that. Oh, hang on. Don't know what happened there. There we go. I'll open that one. So this is opening my smart linked object, which again, it's actually, I tend to do the babushka doll thing where I package smart objects within smart objects within smart objects. And right. As I'm working on it, and I'm sort of like, okay, that's a final group. I'm ready to kind of work with that as a whole in the image, and then I'll package it up. So if I click on this original, this is the raw. And you can see the highlights and shadows sliders have been adjusted. I didn't bring the temperature down on this one because it's already relatively cool. But what I was doing for all of the images is making sure that they weren't too warm. So if I was as shot, I think it was something like that. It's already cool. If I go auto, if I was just using that as an image, I'd probably warm it up a bit. But right. Because I wanted to bring it into a nighttime scene, I wanted that a little bit cooler. That's one of the tricks to building up the day to night scene, is sort of starting off with something that's a little cooler than you would normally be used to, because the nighttime light would be a cooler blue light than a warm tungsten light. Right. But you still don't want to, because I was adding light, if I get out of that, because I was adding tungsten light into my scene as well. And if I turn everything back on here, so this is what I'd call the tungsten light, so the warm light. So I'm adding that in quite a lot of areas. I think there's something not turned on. The shed, I think I turned off, didn't I? Yeah, so there's a lot of warm light floating around the scene. So I needed to still be able to get back to that in the areas that should be warm. So I didn't want to cool it down too much, if that makes sense. So cooling it down a bit and then warming it up over the top in those areas. There's
like a general rule, if you're bringing your photo in originally, and you know your goal is to try to make this to look like nighttime, that's usually the first step. Open it in. I think you were in Camera Raw before. You can also do it in Lightroom, of changing the sliders down. Get rid of some of that warm, the warm light. Cool. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I've rasterized this. I don't normally rasterize many of my layers because I work non-destructively, but I think I've gone ahead and done that with this one. But that background sky, I cooled down quite substantially more because I knew it was at the back. It didn't need any warmth. It needed to be that cool nighttime look. So that one would have been cooled down a whole lot more in the white balance before I brought it in.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. So I'll start with my images that I'm pulling from in Lightroom. So if I'm looking for something, whatever it is, like if I'm looking for a hammer I'm going to show you in a sec why, then there's a hammer. If I'm looking for a chicken, So I haven't keyworded any of these at all. It's just finding it for me using that built-in AI of Lightroom.
Oh, wow.
And it will find
you haven't
all
tagged
my
it
chickens.
as chicken or anything like that?
No tags, nothing.
Oh, cool.
I am so lazy when I pull images into Lightroom because I don't need to worry about it. I think most of the time it's really good at figuring things out. It doesn't know what possums are, or it doesn't know the little possums that I use. So if I do possums, it's only found the ones that I put into an image. So I had to look up rat to find my possums, but that's okay. I can work.
Need an Australian animal, thesaurus or something like that. That's great.
Yeah. So the other good thing is, like, if I go, okay, I want to find a cat, and I've photographed cats over the years, so many different cats. And then I go through and I'm like, okay, see, some of those aren't cats, but who thinks they're cats? Okay, I want more of this shoot. So all I need to do is turn my search off, having clicked on that, and it takes me directly to that entire shoot. So I can use it as I need to. So that's how it's like. It's been actually makes it so easy to work and go, okay, now I need this, now I need this. Now I need all of the different angles of this particular cat, and and I can find them and I can bring them in. One of the things that I do from Lightroom through to Photoshop to keep the original images as raw is the way that I export them out. So I don't edit in Photoshop. So I just want to highlight that. I don't click edit in Photoshop because that will actually bring in a flattened version or a rasterized version of the file. I export it out, original and settings, and that then gives me the raw with the adjustment data connected to it. And then I have that and I export it out to an elements folder so that I've got everything already in there. So if I go to that elements folder in Bridge, so then I start working in Bridge. So these are all the images. Yep, I'm probably going to use these, and this is where I'd find them.
So just to clarify there, because I really like people's like workflow in that sense and understanding how the thing is. So the elements is like a subfolder of this particular project. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
So you're like, cool.
Yes.
So you're setting it up, and you're like, this is project X, and then you've got a bunch of folders. One of them is elements, and elements is what you call kind of each of the images. And so you'll go through and you're like, I need a chicken, I need a platypus, 5 ducks, a rabbit, all that sort of stuff. And you gather them first. I gather a lot of them. I gather them as I'm going, and I just continue to add them to that folder as I'm working. Yeah. So in this folder, there'll probably be a bunch of images I didn't use necessarily that I thought I might use. Whereas in my Smart Objects link folder, these are my linked files. So these are all, I need to make sure I know where these are, because if I don't, my whole file is broken. So I'll go into that as well later and kind of why. Elements. So then from there, I'll bring that into Photoshop. So I'll go, okay, I was going to get the sheep. Where'd the sheep go? It doesn't really matter. I'll bring the possum in. And this one here, I've also enhanced it. So there's a cool little trick to make a file bigger by enhancing it in Lightroom as well. So that is something that helps if the file's a bit too small. But it keeps it as a raw file. So I open that up. It opens in Camera Raw for me. I make sure that my setting is open in Photoshop as a smart object, because otherwise it's going to flatten it. So I'm always working non-destructively, and it's 16 bits. So my depth is 16 bits. So then when I click on it, so again, highlights are down, shadows are up. This one's going to be more in the foreground, so I don't want to adjust the white balance. So I'll manually work on that in the folder, in the file. Click Open Object, and then I've got my possum. And that one then I'd cut out, and I'll do all the bits and pieces, and I'll kind of create it and then bring it in once it's all cut out into my main file and
then I'll do all the lighting and the color toning and everything from once it's in there. Yeah.
And you mentioned kind of up enhancing. Are you able to show us that? Is that an easy thing to sort of show as you're going along? I think that's something that people would be very interested in, because we all take photos that like aren't super high quality, or maybe you need to zoom in on the subject a little bit, so therefore you've lost a lot of pixels. Because I'm quite interested in that as a taker of blurry, out of focus, quick snaps of my small children.
Exactly. Well, say I just wanted the paw of the cat.
Right, so you've zoomed in a lot.
I've zoomed in a lot. So if I right-click that, so I'm in Lightroom Creative Cloud. You can do this in Lightroom Classic as well. So I've zoomed in and I want to enhance that. So I click Enhance. So right-click, click Enhance, and gives you all the options. So I want super resolution, which actually doubles the image resolution, and it keeps like all the detail. It's quite amazing. So I've been able to use it on phone images and making them large elements in my pieces, and it's kept all that information. So and then you click Enhance, and it does its thing, and it turns it into another smart object, another raw. And once it's done that, there we go. So it's there. Where did it go? There we go. So you can see that it's been enhanced. Let's zoom up on that. You can always go back to the original as well. It's actually got the two of them there. So this is the original, and that's the enhanced one, which is higher resolution. So cool. It's it works really well. Yeah.
Awesome. That's something I did not know. So there we go. Awesome. It means I've used it for so many different elements in here probably. But so bringing in all these elements, but I just wanted to backtrack a bit to the scene, because, we're talking about turning day into night. And so if I go in here and turn off this foreground again, in a second, because I've got a little bit of a spinning ball. This file is 8 gig. I wanted to keep it all here just in case anyone wanted me to go into a particular area. So it is all non-destructive editing and smart linked objects. But here we've got the background without all of the color toning. It's reasonably flat. Now I've got a folder in here that is called Color and Shadows. So I'm going to turn these off individually underneath it. I'm going to turn the ones off so you can see what changes. Okay, so this is the color toning that's then been added to the scene. Now, not quite often I'll have that just over the background, but in this case, there's some elements that I've pulled back that I want in that moody light, that nighttime light, and they're further back in the scene. So this one, the dunny rat that's on top of the dunny over here, and there's a kangaroo in the background there as well. There is light on the lanterns on the shed, and what else is it? Some of these animals too, because that part of the image I wanted to sort of be a little further back into the scene. So then if I zoom out, and these ones as well. So once they're all in there, then I can start going, okay, so I can turn some lights on. I can add some extra atmosphere. So you can see that some of those areas have changed over the top there. So there's a warmth over this side now that's been added over the top. Then just turn them all on independently. The train, which I'll go into in a second. A lot of animals that are further in the foreground, so they're further in the front, so they will stay that bit warmer. Yeah, it's really interesting. I was watching some tutorials recently about shooting Valentina V, I think it was, and about shooting a scene, and they were talking about leading lights, environmental lights, and I actually can't remember the name of the lights, but they're practical lights, they called it. It's a term I'd never heard before, and it's quite interesting sort of seeing you set up the scene, because it's the same sort of thing. You've kind of got the the environmental lights, there might have been another word for it in that context, but then you have the practical lights, and then what would happen, you know, to these subjects from the warm light coming over the top. So even though it's a nighttime scene, you're still adding all this warmth to the image, which it's just really interesting to see. You've even got like sort of ring light on the outside when the light's behind the subjects. I thought it was quite interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and one of the things with this is like, it's like setting up a movie. It's like lighting for Hollywood. Yeah. Because you want to be looking at complementary light, cinematic colors, and how the light falls on all of the individual elements. And in some cases, I'm going to actually draw attention to this. In some cases, in reality, some of that light might not be as strong. Sure. So I'm going to actually point out that, you know, this bit here where the chickens are, I reckon if this was a real image, they're kind of a little more into the dark there. They wouldn't be as highlighted. But I had to make a decision, and Joel Grimes says it, sell the fake. And I adhere to that because this is an artwork. So what I want is I want to be able to sell the idea of it, and that these different, you know, this doesn't jar you. It doesn't kind of, you don't look at it and go, oh, that's wrong lighting, something's going wrong. But at the same time, it doesn't need to be entirely accurate because it's completely make-believe. And you want everything to stand out in a particular way. So lighting the elements means some of them might be a bit bolder than others. And that's even comes into, you know, where am I placing some of these elements? You know, there's these animals. So some of these animals too, all these elements, I had to soften with Gaussian blur and with noise because they are a little bit further back in the scene. While most of the scene's in focus from front to back, there's got to be a bit of difference due to depth of field. So as you go further back into the scene, there's a slight drop off in the clarity of the different elements. And it's the same thing with the atmospheric light. So as you go further back into the background there, it becomes a bit flatter, becomes a bit bluer, becomes a bit foggier. So there's a whole lot of build up so that when you come to the front of the scene, these animals here are popping. They're like, look at me, and they've got the rim light. And I've always loved rim light. I think my favorite time to go shoot is the golden hour, and I can light people up with a halo. And so having it so that I could do that in this image was a lot of fun, but I had to make sure that I had enough motivated light sources to sell that these were rim lit. So I had to add quite a lot of light sources that might cast this kind of rim light behind the subjects. And I also had to consider, okay, if the light's above, where's the light falling on these different subjects? How is the light falling on the subjects? So every piece that I've added, one at a time, I light as I go. So they would have seen that in the speed edit, that I don't go putting all of the animals in and the elements and then lighting it. It's one at a time. One at a time to make sure that it's fitting correctly and it's making sense from that perspective.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Now, in the background, I'm going to go back over here. So I turned that one off accidentally. There we go. So I want to go into the train because the train's got all of this light coming out of it from there. And if this was daytime, that train wouldn't be that bright because there's no contrast between the darkness that's there and the light that would be on in that train. So what I've had to do is a whole lot of painting with light on the train so that it kind of, it looks like it's nighttime, it's been lit up. So if I go into the train here, so this is a smart linked object. So on this file that has all of the images in it, I'm clicking back and it's taking a little bit of time, but I'll explain. I've had to make each element that I've separated out as a smart linked object instead of a smart object. So this train has this little symbol on it. That means it's linked. And that means that it's actually not living directly on this file. I'm going to try and explain it as best as I can.
Yeah.
It's not living here.
Yeah.
It's living in another folder, and it's linked to it. So it's actually living in a folder that is, so all of my elements that have to do with this particular project are all in here. It's all of those smart linked objects are living in here. And they're all large document format files, but they're living here. So if I move this folder, my file mode, it's terrible. So if you do smart linked files and you go that way, it's a great way of saving space. But please don't lose your links because unlike smart objects they're there in that file. You won't lose them. Smart linked objects have to be located in a particular place. But it does mean that if you update something, and if I was to click on one of these and update it just from here, it would update in the original file as well. So
yeah, cool.
I've had to do that because this is so massive. I've got an M1 Mac and it can do a fair bit, but as I started working on this and I got maybe a quarter of the way through and I had everything as just smart objects, which is the way I work if it's not too big a file, it just started to really slow down. So I went through and changed them all to smart linked objects, and it meant that I can stay non-destructive all the way through my editing process.
And how do you make it a linked smart object?
Yeah, so I would make it a smart object first. So if I go in here, okay, this is a background image. It's just actually the scene that's in this room here. And as I said, I think I flattened out a couple of those in the background, but I'm just going to make that a smart object to demonstrate. So we can pretend this
something in the timeline.
Yeah.
Smart object.
So right click, create a smart object. So I've made it a smart object to start with, but once I've got this, everything that I want packaged within this smart object, then I right click and I convert it to a linked object. So when I do that, then it says, where do you want to save it? And I'll say room. So I call it what I want to call it so I know I can refer back to it. Room, it's going into that folder. Click save. And once it's saved, it will change the little icon and it will be linked instead of embedded into the main document.
And another reason I think, sorry, you go on.
No, go. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think this is really interesting as well. Like if you're finding that you're doing something similar to this, or you're working with large files and things like that, and you're not using like an M1 Mac, which is really great, that's a very powerful computer. But if you're working on something that's a little bit older, maybe running a bit slow, this is even like a great method to try to keep your system, running nice and smooth. So something to consider, like even if you're not working with super large files, you could be working with something A3, A2 or something, and you're finding things are going a bit slow because you're using really high res imagery and things like that. There you go. That's a great tip for you.
Yeah. And I think at that point, a lot of people do end up just rasterizing and flattening out things so that their files are smaller. But what that means is that you then can't go backwards and you can't kind of adjust something that's further back in your files. So if I click on the train here, you'll see that I've kind of got to go a fair way back. So I'm like, as I said, it's those dolls that you put inside each other. I've got to go a fair way back to get back to the start.
Yeah.
But any changes I make on any part of this file will be reflected in the main one. And I can, go all the way back to the raw file, and I could make changes completely on the white balance, and I could use the brush to brush in shadows and highlights even just on my raw file there if I wanted to go back, which quite often I do. So, I've brought this file in. I've got the highlights and shadow sliders have been adjusted. I won't make any changes there yet. So I'll go back in here. Now I've put a green background there just so you can see the cutout. And that's how I often work if I'm cutting something out, because then you can clearly see if anything needs a bit of refining. So having a contrasting color there to work with really helps.
Like that's your own little green screen. It's cool.
Yeah. You can change it. So I do that by creating a color fill solid color layer and choosing whatever contrasting color I want. And that can be changed later. So that's there. I can see what I'm working on. Oh, that's a bit bright, isn't it? I'll go back to the green. I'll turn that one off. And so then what I want to do is I want to work on these windows. So if I turn off all of these adjustments in the window, you can see the original here. And
there's no light coming out of that. That's like almost
it's
completely like, black pixels.
It's
in
dark,
that first one. Yeah.
There's nothing going on. And I could probably have put an animal in there or whatever else. So there's options there. But what I wanted to do is have that light and have that be a motivated light source in the image that was shining out onto the animals as well. So I don't do it in just one section. You know, you kind of have to build up these adjustments, because if you just try and add light or add a white section there, it's not really going to work and look realistic. So I start by making this window here a sort of lighter, whiter, not completely white. So if I click on there, that's in screen mode at 74%, so you can still see a little bit of reflection. Then if I add on top of there, so I've done a color fill, basically the same thing there. It's sort of white with screen mode. So
and did you kind of brush this in, or did you use the pen tool or something like that, or?
So on something like this, it works really well to use the pen tool, because you can get pretty accurate. So you can go around the windows and adjust as you need to. I'm not a huge fan of the pen tool normally, because I kind of like to use the brush. So I'll show you how I do it with the brush as well. But yeah, in this case, it does work really well. And then you'd create from that, you would create a selection. So path, work path selection, and then you've got a selection. So you can do it for all of the windows there and add to your selections. The other way I do it, if I'm just wanting to use the brush, if I turn these off, I'm going to create a solid color layer. I'll make it white. I'm going to use the mask, so I will Command I to invert that mask. So now I can basically paint with white. I won't turn it down yet. This is a solid white. I can adjust my blending modes after I've done it. But I go in and create a brush that has a hardness of about 80%. So it's just that little bit soft around the edges, but not too soft. I'm going to turn off pressure sensitivity just so I know exactly, I can see how big that brush is going to be. And because there's a curve on the edge, that works really well. Now I'll turn up the flow to 100%. And then click there and click Shift to create a straight line. So if I've clicked there and then I click Shift, it creates a straight line. So I can kind of go around pretty quickly. And what I'll do is these areas here I need to fix up. I'm going to turn off. I don't know if you guys noticed what it was doing there, but it's on snap. And because I've got these lines going through, it was snapping.
It snapped to the guides.
Yeah, kind of annoying. So we don't want it to snap. There we go. No snapping. And yeah, just kind of do that. Do it pretty rough to start with. Fill it in. And then when I get down here, because it's a mask, I can just turn it off and on and sort of make the adjustments as I need to. If I'm wanting to have it kind of curved, smooth line, I can turn up my smoothing. So if I did, if I wanted to go around the edge here and clean that up, if you turn up smoothing, it keeps it really smooth, and you can, if I turn that down and I try and do it,
it's always going to be a little bit rough,
jaggedy.
Right? It's always going to be a little
rough.
bit.
I can't control my hands that well. So the smoothing really helps with those kind of areas as well. So then once that's all done, then you've got kind of your mask there, and then you can start playing with. You can play with a few things. So you could soften off the edge of that mask by feathering it, because there might be a little bit of a light spill kind of coming around those edges. It wouldn't be a really hard edge. And then you could play with the blending modes as well. So for a lot of the build up, I used screen mode, and I had it turned down a bit.
So that screen kind of allows a little bit of the background to kind of come through.
Correct. Yeah. So all of these blending modes are very, very powerful. If you go up to darken, multiply, all of those ones, maybe I'll just do a demo of that. I will paint here with black, white, and mid-tone grey. And multiply will bring out all the blacks, make the whites disappear. So all of the ones in this one, darken does a similar thing. They do that, so they get rid of the lighter colors. And then this is sort of the opposite. So the dark colors won't show up, and especially the blacks with screen, but the whites will. So it works really well when you're adding atmosphere effects and things like that, which I do quite often. And then this section here is more about it's about the grays. So it makes the grays disappear, and it does different things to the transparency of the darks and the lights. So playing with blending modes can be really powerful, because you want to kind of build up on this light coming out of the window. You don't just want it to be just this flat white kind of thing. There might be some color that needs to be added to the light, so some warmth. There might be some extra light that needs to come from the center of the window, and it might start dissipating as it gets closer to the edge. Right. So if I sort of turn all of this back on again, with this, the mask, I've kind of pulled some of this warmth out of the middle. So there's considerations of like, okay, so if a light's really close to its source, what color is it? If it's really a little bit further away, the color changes a bit. So you sort of want to play with variations there in building it up. So you can see that's not all solid. There's also some spill around the edges there, some soft spilled light from this one. So I'm turning on the mask just to show where it's showing up and where it's not showing up. So I've added a bit of soft light spilling out from the edges of the train window as well. So that helps to sell that light's kind of spilling out from the train. So
that's awesome. I'll let you know, we've only got a few minutes left today. Okay. So we are almost out of time. We do have another stream tomorrow as well, just letting everybody know. We've got about a minute left. So I don't know if that's enough to do anything else. Maybe we could wrap and give a bit of a plug for tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll jump back into the main image here, because tomorrow I want to work through adding one of these animals into the scene, and how I would build up on actually making it so that they're lit correctly. So it's taking you further with the lighting. How would you add rim lighting? How would you add shadows? How would you change sort of a soft lit animal and bring it into a scene so it looks like the light from here is falling on them, where is the shadow, all of that. So I've done that with every kind of element here, and it's a build up. It's using those blending modes and things like that as well to kind of help add the realism to the image. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's tomorrow. So thanks everyone for joining us today, and we'll be back tomorrow with Karen. and same time. So it's 1 p.m. here, but who knows where you are in the world watching. So it's exactly the same time tomorrow. And thank you all for joining us. It's been a pleasure. And thank you, Karen, so much. There were I made a few notes, so lots of great little tips in there that I really enjoyed. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Flynn. Thanks everyone for joining us.
And we'll see you tomorrow on Adobe Live.